You are welcome to Eyewitness, our program that takes a different look at the Nigerian narrative. I'm your host, Jibrin Ibrahim. The normal narrative about Nigeria is about the self-serving elite that's interested in looting the public treasury for the aggrandizement of themselves and their families. It's about avarice, it's about self-interest. But that's not the only story about Nigeria. What we try to do in this program is to show there are members of the Nigerian community who have devoted their lives, their skills, and their focus to helping the nation, to promoting community, and to public service, and that story should also be told. In the program today, we have a leading innovator in education, Dr. Guyene Fesi, who will talk to us today about the crisis of education in the country. I think it's important to point out that in 1973, the Nigerian government, then under General Gowon, held a retreat for government, and he said, following the Civil War, he wants one sound policy advice that will ensure that future generations of Nigerians never engage on the terrible path of civil war again. The conclusion of that retreat in 1973 was to initiate universal primary education so that every child born as of the end of the Civil War, 1970, would have access to free and qualitative primary education. That was why UPA was started in 1976. And the story of Nigeria was then supposed to be that by today, 95% of Nigerians are educated. Dr. Guyene, that's certainly not the case. And in fact, we can say that our educational system is in crisis. Is it in crisis? And if so, what is the nature of the crisis of Nigeria's educational system?
Thank you very much, Prof, for inviting me to this program. This is a very important program, if you ask me. And yes, education is in crisis. Indeed, education in Nigeria, especially at the basic education level, is an emergency, and we need to treat it as such. So you rightly said that a majority of the children are not in school who should be in school. Those who are in school are not learning. And I think during this program, we'll talk about why, at least provide some ideas of why we think that is not happening. So thank you once again for inviting me to this program.
Okay, let's start from the beginning. Your own background, educational background, career background, vocational interest. What have you devoted your life to doing so far?
Thanks again. I am proudly Nigerian, and also I'm very proud to be a teacher. First, I went to school in Jos. I grew up in Jos. My primary school education was in Jos. Secondary school was in Jos as well, Baptist High School, after which I went to ABU. And in ABU, I studied literature in English and graduated with a second qualification in education, which is postgraduate certificate in education. After that, I went to University of Lagos, where I did a master's program in education management. And then I also did a PhD in counseling. So my educational endeavors have all been around education. You know, that's it. So in terms of profession, like I said earlier, I started by being a teacher, which is what I love to do. And since joining, I did my NYC also. I taught during my NYC, which is almost standard operating procedure at the time we graduated. then served as a teacher for many years. Then I moved into development work. So I've served in different capacities, working on development programs. I've headed teacher training programs for the then DFID, now FCDO program. I was the national program manager for that program. Essentially, that program was to support Nigerian government to implement its reform agenda for teacher training. Before this program, I served on another program which is called Education Sector Support Program in Nigeria. That program also was working within the sector to support what we call whole school development, so whole school improvement program. And during that program, we realized that there was a fundamental problem with teachers. So the quality of teaching was not up to scratch, let's put it mildly. And then we thought that having a program dedicated to teacher training would really fundamentally uproot some of the program. So we worked with the National Commission for Colleges of Education, worked with Federal Ministry of Education and some states to look at the reform agenda for teacher training. And that's what the program, the TPD program is all about. We also worked with the UBEC, of course, to support teacher training. And what we found during this program is mind-boggling, that quite a large number of teachers cannot teach. They have no idea about modern pedagogy, and we know what modern society is. We're in a knowledge economy. So we really need to have teachers who understand what skills are required and who are able also to impact those skills, and also using modern methods to actually support teachers. So I've been a development consultant now for a while, supporting the design of education reform programs and supporting implementation of many programs, and also providing technical assistance to undertake studies to understand what the problem is.
Thank you. We'll come back to your explosive statement about teachers who cannot teach. But before we come back to that issue, let's go back to the story of 1976. UPE, Universal Primary Education, and the expectation that all Nigerian children, the policy is that 100% of children born in this country would go to school that are of a good quality. What happened?
I think that policy was taken forward by the Universal Basic Education Law, which also now makes it mandatory, is compulsory for all children to be in school, and school is free. I mean, basic education, which means from early childhood to junior secondary school, is supposed to be free for all Nigerians. It's supposed to be compulsory, and if parents don't send their children to school, there's a penalty for that. Unfortunately, there's nothing to compel government itself to fulfill its own obligation, because, I mean, there's a law, and it says that you provide a free and compulsory education, which then means that you have to provide the schools. So the schools have to be available for the children to attend, right? So yes, you're going to punish parents for not sending their children to school or what? But then there's nothing to say that government has to provide. So that's where I think that we're struggling to make sure that all the Nigerian children get spaces in school. The schools we have are not enough. We'll start by that. So the few that are available are also not in states that can accommodate children. So if you go to rural communities, for instance, you might find one classroom, you might find broken down systems, you hardly find teachers there. There might be one head teacher who is also the teacher to the number of children in the school. While if you come to city centers, you see schools that are overflowing with children. I've counted myself 400 children in a classroom with one teacher, hardly any space for the teacher to be in class, and the teacher was standing outside because the children were all seated up to the blackboard. And then the schools, some of them, majority of the schools that were built initially had no toilets. So it's just now that we're building toilets in some of the schools. And because of the magnitude of the problem, you can see that it's very difficult to go around. So there are many reasons why the children are not coming into school. Therefore, I can tell you that UB, as was envisaged, is really not working.
So government develops a policy, but it does not make provision to ensure that that policy is fully implemented. Is that it?
That's what it is. So yes. So for instance, the policy also ensures that, or states that, children ages 3 to 5, which is early childhood, should be in school. So this law includes the early childhood years, which we all know that are very critical years for every child, because we know that those are formative years. However, we bring them to school, but we don't have qualified teachers to look after them. And that age has a special way that you look at them, because they're babies. So the way that you teach them is different, the kind of infrastructure that you need for them is different, and yet we bring them to school and treat them as though they're class 1 children or class 3 or even class 6. So the infrastructure is not there, the materials are not there for the children. As we know, at that age, they should have naps. So which then means that you should have beds, you should have, provision for feeding, you should have provision for changing the children. You have nannies that are trained and qualified to look after them. They're also prone to hazards. They could pick up things and get sick. You need qualified people to look after them. We don't have those kind of people within the system, and yet we insist that we bring the children from ages 3 to 5 into school, and then they start primary 1 at age 6. We also have to have, if you want, the setting is such that you have to have corners, because today you need the children to learn by doing. So they learn through play. So you must have the equipment to play with. And they are normally educational toys or things like that. We don't have those. And then somebody will tell you that, oh, let them count sticks. We counted sticks in 1960, and here we are, we're medical doctors. That doesn't work. So we also need to reassess what we can deliver and begin to deliver what we can afford, and then see how we can get other critical partners to pick up where we are unable to take things forward. So right now, I think there's a lot of work to be done. The infrastructure is not there. We haven't even come to the issue of teachers, but more importantly, the issue of school leadership. Because if you don't have the leadership that is visionary, that can guide the school in terms of school improvement, then really, what do we have? Because schools are meant for people to learn so that they can live lives, yeah? But if you are in a school and you're not learning what you should be learning because the leadership doesn't know what the direction of travel is, then it's a bit of a problem. So these are some of the issues that we really need to think through, and then see whether this policy is working, and if it's not, why is it not working? And then how can we support the system to make sure that we get it right, so that our children, when they're in school, they're actually learning and not just in school.
Let's go back to your statement that we have so many teachers who cannot teach. Unpack that to us who are not teachers. What does that mean? I thought every teacher teaches. That's why they are teachers.
Well, yes, okay. Within the system in Nigeria, we have quite a number of teachers that are not qualified. So the law is that you have to have a minimum of NCE, right? Nigerian Certificate of Education, means you have to have that at a minimum to be able to teach in primary schools in Nigeria. We have a number of people who have the NCE. However, they cannot teach. They don't have the competence, they don't have the capability to teach. We have another category of people within the system, I don't know whether to call them teachers because they're not, also who are supposed to be teachers, but who don't have the knowledge. They have no pedagogy, they have no training, they have no certificate either, and they're within the school. So really, we have quite a large number, and we've done quite a number of studies here. Development partners that have come, working with government, of course, in many of the states, which I could name, have carried out studies and looked at the quality of teachers, and they found that the teachers, even some of them who say they have the minimum qualification, are unable to teach. And those who don't even have, you can imagine what they're doing. Some of them can't even speak English. I know that the law says that you can teach up to class 3 in local language, but there has to be a transition, which then means that we also have to teach in English to enable these children to transit at some point so that they are learning. But that isn't happening. So we have huge problems in that direction. Although UBEC is working and with NCE and other NERC to ensure that, with TRCN of course, to ensure that teachers have continuing professional development happening. But the base is so low that if you have a 3-day training for a teacher, it's not enough to qualify that teacher to be able to deliver good learning. So, but what can they, I mean, the system can't afford more than 3 days or 5 days in a year. And some teachers haven't had any continuing professional development in 10 years. So you can imagine, first, they are not trained. Second, they haven't got any kind of in-house, in-service training. So what can they offer? But they are in school and we're paying their salaries.
Let's go back to this issue you raised about traditional pedagogy and modern pedagogy. When we were in school in the early 1960s, we didn't have all these educational toys that are now assumed to be basic, yet we learned. Today, you are saying many of our schools also don't have those modern toys. So what is wrong with going back to the traditional pedagogy? We can count with sticks. We did that as kids. Why can't they do it today?
I agree. We can count with sticks, but you're talking about artificial intelligence. We're in a world where things are different. So we're looking at this world in a different, from different perspective, right? So while there are things they can learn using sticks, we can't catch up if we did that in Nigeria. If we don't bring technology into our learning system right now, we're going nowhere anytime soon. Because technology, not only does it allow a lot of people to learn at the same time, but it has a lot of information that you don't need the teacher to have. In those days, our teachers were the custodians of knowledge. So they knew everything and they'll come into the class with a piece of paper, read out, you write. Today, the children can find information from everywhere. So all you need to do is to support them. So the teacher actually has transitioned from being the custodian of knowledge to a facilitator of learning. So you have to provide an environment for the children to learn, for the children to make mistakes, for them to be innovative, and then through their mistakes, they can discover things, and then we have children who are prepared for tomorrow. We know that, as you and I are seated here, we don't even know what the jobs will look like next year. Remember that just before the COVID hit, everybody thought you needed to be in the office, to work from the office. You had to come in and clock in at 8 and close. Now we know that you can work from everywhere. So those are the kind of things we're talking about. So if you don't prepare these children to be able to work from home, from wherever, then you're not preparing them to lead a life of dignity in 21st century. So we need to think outside the box and say, where is the world going, to help these children to be critical thinkers. They have capacity of logical reasoning and are able also to solve problems, because it's about problem solving. So it's not about being a doctor. We know that even medicine, the way we knew it, is no longer that way. You have telemedicine today. You have people doing many things today. So it's slightly different from the traditional doctor as you knew them. Same thing with engineers, same thing with all professions. So things have changed, things have moved on. We need to move on also. And I'm not sure that when you talk about technology, they have to be very expensive or high-end technology. There are basic things that these children can use and learn. And you and I know that if we hang around our grandchildren enough, we can see what they do with simple technology, even without assistance. So why can't the children in the rural community also have access to those kind of technology? If not, we're having a divided society where some people have, others don't have. We prepare a group of children to face tomorrow. The other group is not prepared. And then we see where we are today when you have exclusion, when you have people feeling that they are excluded from the system.
Okay, we shall come back to this issue of transition from teachers to facilitators. Meanwhile, viewers will take a short break. We'll be right back.
To every politician, as the campaigns gain momentum and passions begin to rise, remember, the errors of your opponents do not make you a success. Do not run down your opponent and inflame passions to violence between and among your supporters. What counts is what you plan to do for the electorate and how you intend to relieve the sufferings and bring succor. Nigeria is in dire need of patriotic leaders at all levels, leaders who will make national development their priority. Concentrate on telling the electorate what you intend to do when you get into office. Focus on making your vision clear to the electorate. Don't engage in verbal abuses, fake news or speeches. Keep dealing with issues that will bring progress. You win the hearts and minds of the people by being above board, by being civil, patriotic, and showing empathy. Let's join hands to make the 2023 elections peaceful. A message from the National Orientation Agency.
We are back, viewers, and we were last discussing this issue of the transition from teachers, as it were, to facilitators. And the last point Dr. Nguyen made is that this transition, these new tools don't have to be very expensive. So my next question is, we do know resources are very thin in the country today. How can we successfully make this transition within the context of the limited resources available in the country today?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. I would like to start by saying that we need purposeful leadership. We need to have leaders, school leaders that understand how to run a school. We don't need people who, because they've been in the system for 30 years, therefore they qualify, you promote them to be teachers. So if you have people who are visionary leaders, they can source materials from around the environment. That's one. The second thing is that if we're serious about education, we need to pay attention to education. So there's no if or but about it. We need to just reallocate resources from other areas that are not priority at this time. Because remember when we started, we said education is an emergency in this country. If children are not learning, if they can't read at age 6, 7, it's difficult to now train them later. So we need to focus attention to make sure that we provide whatever it is that we need to provide by cutting down on wastes, for instance, and providing technology within the schools, providing infrastructure for schools in a way that the teachers are able to use what they have for the children to learn. So, for instance, some of the programs that we've done in terms of teacher training is also to train teachers to be innovative, to do what we call, to be able to improvise, if you like. So things like these water bottles, these empty water bottles, they use them for many things. So we're able to create materials that children can use to practice and do things. Today's facilitation is all about learning to do things yourself, enabling children to use their hands, and that helps them to process. It helps them to think. It helps them to ask questions. It helps them, and then the teacher is just there to be able to provide guidance, you know. But without materials, you can't, I mean, it will just be about dreaming, really. So we really need to invest. Yes, it's, no matter how we talk about improvisation, it's expensive because you need to buy materials. So for instance, you need to buy glue at the least. You need to buy staplers. You need to buy things that the children will be able to use to do things. So this manufacturing of cars, remember that even those who, the engineers that do that, they do several versions before they get it right. So even for children, they need to be able to practice, to be able to use things, to be able to draw, to be able to... So it's about providing materials for them. Some of the materials are in the environment. So we are training teachers to be able to identify those materials, and also the community to be able to identify materials and provide the schools with those kind of materials to enable the children to learn to do things. And also there are people within the community with different skills that if we are innovative in the way that we train. So if, for instance, if you have a head teacher that is really smart and knows what to do, he can arrange, or she can arrange for, say, a carpenter within the community to train the children, to work with them during the holiday. So they're gaining skills. You understand what I mean? So they're practicing. So there are quite a number of organizations within the communities themselves. Say farming, for instance. If you want to talk about agriculture when you're teaching a topic, you could take the children to a farm. There are many farms nearby, but you have to have a head teacher who is able to take such responsibility. So it's about a different mindset. It's about a mindset that enables you to know that every child that comes to a school has the capacity to learn. There's no child that cannot learn. It doesn't matter how they can learn. They learn at different paces. They learn in different ways. You also train a teacher to be able to identify what kind of assistance a child needs, and you provide that kind of assistance. So we call it a differential learning. So you might be smart in reading or in journalism. Some other person is a good sports person. That does not make that person any less intelligent than you are, and that doesn't make you less intelligent than that person. So it's about teachers identifying the need of a child, the capacity of a child, and supporting that child at their level to be able to learn. So you need to be able to train our teachers to identify this. Even within a class, sometimes you see a child is blind, not fully blind. The child can see, but not very well. So that child is squinting in the class. The teacher, all they do is slap the child and say, you don't know anything, you don't... But if you identify that that child has a need, you bring the child from behind to the front. You pay special attention to that child. You report that child to the parents. Sometimes the parents don't even know. You tell the parents that this child is struggling. Do you want to take the child to a clinic? Maybe a doctor can now say, oh, this child has issues with the eye. We can correct it. If you look at the children of those well-to-do, you see young children with glasses. But the children of the poor, because nobody has paid attention to it, then because they can't see, they don't learn. And because they're not learning, you say they are not brilliant children, and then they're left behind. So we need teachers who also can identify children with needs, special needs, and are able to take such responsibility to help the children. Sometimes children come to school, they haven't eaten. By the time it's 10 o'clock, they're tired, they're sleeping, and the teacher keeps hitting them on the head. Why are you sleeping? You're a very lazy child. But the child hasn't eaten. You don't know anything about this child. You need to train the teachers to be able to identify such children. Some children come into the school, their parents have had a fight all night. The child is traumatized by what parents have done. You need to also be able to have a teacher who can identify that that child has special needs and is attending to the child. So there's quite a lot that we need to train our teachers to be able to do. We haven't started that. We are even at the stage of just training them on pedagogy. We haven't talked about content knowledge. We haven't talked about even security and safety and well-being of the child.
It's very encouraging to hear you say there are innovative ways that we can approach some of these issues. And I think the responsibility of training the teachers to know what to do is extremely important. Let's now raise the issue that you broached in your last sentence about security. In 2010, the school census conducted in the country showed that in Lagos State, 95% of children of primary school age were actually in primary school. In Borno State, it was only 23% that were going to primary school. That was in 2010. 12 years later, we do know a lot of those schools have been destroyed by Boko Haram. We know there has been so much violence. We know students have been kidnapped from schools, and currently in much of the Northwest, the new fad in town is kidnapping students for ransom. What's your perspective of this introduction of terrible level of violence and its impact on our educational system?
It's really sad. The statistics are are terrible. But I just want to say that even before these terrible incidences, we've had cases of violence against children in school. Whether we call it that or not, children have been traumatized. Children, just by our, I don't want to say culture because somebody will come after me, but just the way we think that we should bring up children. If you go into a typical school, you see a teacher with a whip. You see a head student with a whip. You see everybody carrying a stick to use and control the children. So that already is violence against children. It's just that this is dramatic. The adoption is terrible, and it's large numbers of children at once. But I can tell you, as somebody who is in school all the time, that our children see a lot of trauma. They see a lot of violence, either from colleagues, the fellow children, or from teachers. First of all, in some schools you go, the schools are abandoned. There's no single adult in the school with the children. They come all morning, they're playing until later they leave. They are exposed to all kinds of dangers. So luckily, the federal government itself in 2014 conducted a study on violence against children in school. And what they found was exactly what I'm telling you. This is from the report as well. There was a lot of violence in schools. And therefore, the federal government, working with state governments, have come up with a national policy on safety, security, and violence against children. Long word, but yes, there's now a policy on the national policy on violence against children in schools. And they also developed a national guidelines for implementing that policy. And then there's a minimum standard, which was supported by UNICEF, and I was the lead consultant on developing the minimum standards for safety and security and violence against children in school. So the whole idea is to make sure that children don't suffer, and that schools are all the time open for children to attend. You don't shut down schools for any reason. That's the thinking. So whatever the government or whatever the society will do to ensure that schools are not closed at any time should be done. So there's a policy on that. The policy frowns also against the use of schools for military purposes, the use of schools for religious purposes, the use of schools for any other thing except for learning, so that the schools are safe for children. So there's a policy. There's also a national, the guidelines for implementing the policy. There's a minimum standard that we hope would help. But with the magnitude of the problem, you can see that many of our schools are not fenced. Teachers cannot even teach. Now you want to add to them the issue of security, because they have to be trained in a special way to identify what they call early warning signs. You have to have a plan in school, a school plan that helps to mitigate against hazards. So all of these things are technical areas that our teachers need to know, head teachers need to know. That's why I started by saying that we need head teachers that are visionary, that are very innovative, that are capable of securing their schools, making sure that the teachers are teaching, providing mentorship, providing support for the teachers, and ensuring that our government does not just stop at the level of this policy. We need to be able to put money behind this policy, because nothing is going to happen just because we have a beautiful policy. We have to make sure that the schools are secure. We need also to make sure that the communities are involved in securing the schools, because nothing can happen in the without the community. The schools are within communities. So schools need to involve the traditional rulers in the area, need to involve parents and all of those things. And all of these issues are actually outlined in the policy and also in the guidelines.
You've set me thinking, Dr. Gwen Fessy. When I was in primary school, I was whipped all the time, and I still recall I felt traumatized. But when I discuss with my classmates, they tell me, well, it's because you are whipped. That's why you are disciplined and in control of your life today, suggesting that it was positive I was whipped so harshly. But you appear to be criticizing this violence against children in school. Why are you criticizing it?
Well, I'm sure that maybe you are a very good exception. If you look around today, you see that a lot of husbands have been killing their wives. There's a lot of violence in the family. Where do we think some of these things are coming from? And I'm not making any judgment. I don't know. But I'm just saying that there's a lot of violence around. So maybe, just maybe, that could have been the reason. But we do know that society is dynamic. Things have changed. There are many ways that you could actually discipline a child. Nobody is saying that all children are right just because they're children, you just hug them all the time. There are very many ways. So for instance, if a child does something that is not correct, you can tell the child, because you know children love to play, you can tell the child that, okay, during break, you stay and write down what you did is not correct. The child will come back to you, they will never do that. There are many ways that you can train a teacher to discipline a child. So there are many other areas of disciplining a child without whipping them. Because we also know that in the case of whipping children, some people have lost their eyes. Some people have had injuries that you can't reverse. So what do you do? So we need to also look at different ways of disciplining children. Sometimes you can invite the parents to the school, because sometimes these children are doing things that their parents don't even know. So the parents can work with you to support that child. And sometimes the child is demonstrating some kind of behavior because they are traumatized from something else. So, but engaging parents and also professionals is a way of solving that problem. And teachers also need special training to be able to know how to manage a class. And there's some training around classroom management, behavior management. So we don't just tell teachers that, oh, don't whip the children, without giving them alternative. There are alternative ways of addressing difficult children and helping them to get over the issues. Sometimes a child is even difficult because they're smart, they're very smart. And so what you're doing in class is not enough, it's not occupying them enough. So they they distract other children. You can find that out also, and then you whip that child instead of finding something else for that child to do. So there are also ways that we train teachers, and you can hear from all the things that I've been saying that is a lot on a teacher. So, but to do this in 3 days is just not possible, and that's what we do for continuing professional development. So we must think about how to have a very robust plan for how we train our teachers, and also how they transition from the old school to a new school of facilitating learning rather than being custodians of knowledge.
I find your arguments very persuasive, that we should do all we can to stop violence against our children in all levels of education. And I think it was very good that you drew attention to the fact that violence is not just the Boko Haram and the bandits who invade schools. It's also what our teachers do to our children, what the fellow students do to the other students, and that we should all be advocates against violence in schools. And this brings up the issue of what is the content that will prevent this violence? Shouldn't there be a place for peace education in our educational system?
Yes, you have touched something that is very dear to my heart. I think that we need to prepare our children to be able to live with other people. Because as you know, and I've been reading quite a lot of your articles, you've talked about peace a lot, and about how we've been profiling, and this country right now is divided, as we all know, along different lines. We need to pull together, and that can be done through peace education. If we're able to train our teachers, because the teachers are the ones that engage, in addition to parents, of course, are the ones that engage with these children at a very young age. So if we're able to build a platform where they are able to tolerate each other, able to understand that they're different and yet they can work together, are able to see that you can solve problems. There are alternative ways of solving problems. We did that when we were growing up, I think, before the politicians found another definition to how we should live. But I think that we can go back to that point. We can do a lot through peace education, but we need to start that with the teachers. Because if the teachers understand how to engage with children, how to to support children to work together, how to respect each other. Even things like, look at, say, for instance, even our national anthem. When it's being played, you see people just walking around. These are things that we've forgotten because nobody is interested in those things anymore. We no longer teach our children that we are all Nigerians. We need to respect Nigeria. We need to be patriotic Nigerians. We don't understand what Nigeria is to us. We only know that, oh, I'm from Benue State, I'm from Plateau State, I'm from Lagos State, I'm from Southwest, Southeast. You know, we need to be able to pull together and say, look, we're in trouble. So talking about the educational quality that I was talking about, there's no single state in Nigeria that can say we don't have a problem. There's not one. If you go to the public schools in all the states, it's the same thing. You were talking about Lagos, where you said about 90-something% of the Lagos people who live in Lagos are in school. Over 70% of those schools are private schools. So they're not. So Lagos is in the same boat as every other person. Yes, there might be reform agenda now. So if we don't look at this as a collective, look at the problem that we have in our schools as, look, this country is failing its children, therefore what can we do? And also, how do we equip our teachers to make sure that there's love of one another, that there's respect for each other, and that children who are from different parts of Nigeria can live in other parts of Nigeria, but they will live and grow up and feel the sense that they're Nigerians, and also that they can live there. So peace education is central. First of all, you can't govern without peace. We can see the example right now. So you also cannot teach if the children in school are all the time fighting and there's no peace even in school. All you do is you keep calling the parents. What time do you have to dedicate to learning? So we have to look at peace as a central theme in our schools, in educational pursuit. Otherwise, we won't get it right. Even if we have doctors, lawyers, and everybody's fighting, then what? We don't have a country. So we really need to build peace, to make sure that we work together, we understand that we're all Nigerians, and that whatever we do affects each one of us. And that can be done, you know, at a scale by engaging teachers right now and making sure that all the children that come into school get a feel of it, and then from there we can have other conversations as well.
Thank you. I know one of the things you find passionate is advocacy for access to education for the girl child, which you've always argued is the pathway to empowerment. What are your views on that?
My take is that, I mean, we all know that girls' education is central. I mean, we keep saying that if 50% of the population does not participate, then we're only working on 50%. So we must ensure that girls also are able to get education. In some parts, they're getting, in other parts, not so much. But what I think, one of the issues, in addition to cultural issues, is that poverty is at the heart of it. If you look at it, when people have resources, then you can engage with them constructively about whether they should release their children to go to school. But if somebody is struggling to eat, they are not going to listen to you. It doesn't matter how much you advocate. We've done that before. So it's about how do we create an economy that supports families, that the rural community, that they have a way of getting some kind of livelihood so that they can release their children to go to school. You know, you can begin to engage with them only when they are educated. If you look at those who we say the culture does not allow, within those cultures that we say do not allow girls to go to school, if you look at those who are better off in the same culture, with the same background, they allow their children to go to school. So we need to look at how we can empower women. And I know that there are some programs. So, for instance, there are some programs around cash transfer where you can give cash transfer to women, and then you
conditional cash transfer.
Well, yeah, it's conditioned based on the fact that they should send their girls to school, right?
Yeah, and
yes.
That's the condition.
Yes, so,
they are given support
so that they can release their
girls
to go to school. And then also, we must find, at the end, we must support these girls also to have something to do. So, for instance, there was a program that was done in Zamfara and Katsina where women were supported to go to colleges of education. They had a scholarship, and they were supported, they went. But at the end, they were not hired. when they were recruiting, they only recruited men, they didn't recruit the women. So it's not encouraging for any other mother to send her child to school. If I'm going to send my daughter to school, she goes through the school and then she has no job at the end of it. So it's also about how do we ensure that this whole campaign about 35% affirmative action, actually is actualized, and that even at the community level, that women are seen to be engaged, in a way that they can also become role models to other girls. So if girls are going to school and they don't have jobs, it's also very problematic. So we need to be able to have a plan that says we will support these girls to go to school, we'll support their parents, we'll encourage mothers by making sure that the girls that are that are supporting you through economic means, that you can free them up, they go to school, and then we support you. The system is there, and we hope that the system will get robust enough to make sure that more girls come to school. But the other issue is about security, because if there's no security, it's very difficult. We just talked about security in schools. If they're going to abduct them, if they're going to... I remember watching TV, and somebody from Niger State said, never again will my children go to school, when those children in Niger State were taken. So security is also very, very important. We have to make sure that we secure schools, and also the infrastructure. You have to have toilets, you have to have things that enable young girls to be comfortable in schools. And then, of course, bottom line is to engage with the gatekeepers. Our traditional rulers and things. We need to be able to work with them to see reason that if we keep away 50% of our population, then our economy is only going to suffer. So we need to be able to make sure that everybody participates in this economy. And luckily, there are quite a number of programs. Like I was telling you earlier, there's the World Bank Adolescent Girls Initiative for Learning and Empowerment. It's also another World Bank program that is in quite a number of states and is supporting girls' education.
Thank you very much. We have just 2 more minutes, but I would really want to get your perspective of what does the future hold for education in this country. Are you optimistic? Are you pessimistic? 2 minutes maximum.
I'm very optimistic. I can't give up on this country because I've been to schools and I've seen quite a number of people within the system that have the desire, they're motivated, but they need the support. So we just need a system that will plan, will be deliberate, and a system that will put quality above sentiment. So we need to identify good quality, competent school leadership teams in school to be able to help. Because we don't have all the resources, but if we have people who have the ideas, they can support with innovative ideas. So we need to equip schools with good leadership, and then the education managers should actually be education managers, not politicians.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gwen Fese. I think it's been a fascinating expose about the crisis facing our educational system. I'm very glad that you are showing positive pathways we can take to address this crisis. You are telling us we must not give up, we must continue the struggle, and that we must mold a future based on less violence in our schools, based on improved training for our teachers who can become facilitators for modern education, and therefore be able to bring up a new generation that can build the new Nigeria. Thank you so much. Viewers, good day.